And we want to welcome you to the third seminar of the Know Us Before You Need Us seminars, and hosted by both the Talbot Hospice and the Alzheimer's Association. And we're so excited about this partnership because we really want to make sure that everyone has access to all of the wonderful community resources and education as you navigate your journey before hopefully actually need this information. Or maybe you're right in the midst of it and you've been able to find this information useful. And we're excited to have this partnership, and we'd love to have your feedback along the way as well. So feel free to give us that feedback. We want to continue to make more of these happen in the future, hopefully. So the reason why we're gathering today is to really feature the caregiver's journey and what impact that has on you and what we can do to help you. And speaking personally, I lost my father from vascular dementia in 2018, and it inspires a lot of the work that I do. And it's a long journey, and it can take a toll on you. It can be really, really gratifying, but you have to take care of yourself. You have to learn some new tricks and some new skills and a new way of relating to your family and to the person you're caring for. And so we wanted to make sure that we brought some of those new resources and opportunities for you to be able to learn and grow to you today. So I'd like to introduce my friend Mia from Talbot Hospice, who's going to talk a little bit more about what to expect today.
We are thrilled to partner with the Alzheimer's Association for this series and the information that we have been able to provide. And today our Lindy Barton and Jody Gunn. Lindy is our bereavement coordinator and Jody Gunn is our grief and spiritual care chaplain. And they're going to bring to you some tips on coping and on taking care of yourself and taking care of your loved one. And it's going to be very informational and I think very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and turn over Cindy from the Alzheimer's Association, who's going to speak first on communications and on all of the things that Alzheimer's can do in order to help. Alzheimer's Association, sorry, it's a lot of words.
Hey, that's okay. We understand. So thank you all very much for coming. And today I'm going to start, by talking about tips on how to effectively communicate and give you some guidance in terms of what to expect with Alzheimer's as the disease progresses. So, we're going to look at what we typically 3 buckets of stages: early, middle, and late stages. And we're going to talk about the changes you might see at that stage, and then the best ways to connect. And as we want to keep in mind, when you have one person with a dementia, Alzheimer's or another dementia, everyone has a different journey. So, these things are kind of loosely, staged, let's say, but it is helpful. So I'm going to give you this little PowerPoint, and I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes, but you'll get slides. Feel free to, jot notes down, and we'll probably hold questions till the end. We hope to have, me speak for about 20 minutes, then Lindy and Reverend speak for another 20 minutes, and then, kind of have Q&A at the end. And we might wrap up, 12:15-ish. Let's enjoy this day. But if we have questions, we're here till 12:30. So whatever works for everybody best. So I will be sharing my screen and just today's program goals. Just a second, and I will. If I go to slideshow, it should pop up as a whole. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So we're going to look at, the communication changes and then identify some ways to, the third bullet, connect and communicate at each stage. And we know communication is a lot of things. It's not just words. It is body language. It is tone of voice, attitude. So when you think about communication, it's all of it, right? It's the nonverbal cues. So a lot of times the preparation for communication with a loved one with dementia happens even before you're in the same room. It's kind of your own kind of mental adjustment, right? So a little checking in, a little, you know, calming ourselves, centering ourselves. And the hope is by teaching you some of this communication strategies and ways to connect, it will reduce your stress and your loved one's stress. So if your loved one has less um, challenging behaviors or less anxiety, then your caregiving will be easier, right? So that's really why we're talking about this as a tool for you to manage stress and to be the most resilient, most informed caregiver you can be, right? So typically people who have Alzheimer's or dementia have early stage symptoms, and they might find words, selecting words or word finding might be one of the things that you're seeing. And it may just take them longer to sort of sift through their filing cabinets of what they want to say and to respond. So they also may be struggling with, anxiousness and feeling worried about decisions they need to make in the future. So you'll see a lot of, you might see worrying show up here. And they might misinterpret what you're saying, which can be frustrating. And it can be challenging to manage that. In the middle stage, you might see people who have had lovely language skills their whole life begin to sort of break it down into more simple phrasing. And that can be quite frustrating for a loved one with dementia who loves words. And if we had time, we have lots of videos about, with examples of people that are really mad at themselves for not being able to express themselves as eloquently as they normally would. So that can be quite frustrating. So just keep that in mind. They will begin to lean more on, getting information from your tone of voice, your body expression, your so to the extent that you're checking in with yourself and you're presenting yourself in the calmest way, that will help them pick up more information. And later on, when we get to the later stages where it's really, in some cases, it can be many, many years down the road. Then they're still there though, so there's communication and they may not be able to speak as clearly or as often, but you can still reach them. And we're going to show you how you can reach them through our senses, music, poetry, words, reading to them, humor, there's a lot of parts of them that are still there. So we want to look for the positive. So in the communication in the early stages, as we mentioned before, we might notice it's taking longer to respond. People may be withdrawing from conversations because they might just feel like it's too hard to answer or it's too hard to, to keep up. So, and they may be struggling with decision making and problem solving because, as we know, and the brain is atrophying, right? It is deteriorating and it doesn't do so in a necessarily linear fashion. A lot of times in Alzheimer's, the first symptom is memory loss. But a lot of times a memory loss can be a part of a memory that sort of, or just a trigger of what's coming up next in the day. It's not necessarily a memory of it's kind of a reminder of what is the routine. And when they don't have that sense of their schedule anymore, and they may not be able to follow as many, that's when their executive functioning starts to get challenging and that their daily living becomes harder. And we need to help them make their decisions, and we want to make their decisions easier. Instead of opening up saying, what do you want to have for lunch? We might say, would you like a ham sandwich or a turkey sandwich today? Giving them a choice, but helping them, with a limited, sort of select from the world. The carte blanche can be very hard for folks to figure that out. So that's one way to help them. And we're also going to look at ways to connect, right? So being direct, as opposed to indirect, keeping our sentences clear and straightforward. We do sometimes need to be careful about idioms, and they're kind of everywhere in English. So certain phrases, like a nurse might come and say, "I'm going to take your blood pressure." Sometimes that might just rattle someone because they might think that's my blood pressure, and it's not that they're always going to feel this way, but sometimes their brain is, their wiring, especially in the beginning, is faulty. So certain days they might seem perfectly able to connect with you and understand what you're saying. Other days, there's just a bigger disconnect that's more noticeable. So that can be frustrating for caregivers as they sort of think to themselves, well, is mom okay or not? My sister says she's not doing very well, but when I talk to her, she seems fine. So, we want to keep in mind that at the early stage, and sometimes throughout the stages of dementia, people can communicate and they might say, "God, your dress is really beautiful. I love your hair today." And they may be able to chit chat, really well. And that's great, but it is kind of confusing because even though they may seem normal and they may seem to be functioning perfectly okay, you might realize that mom hasn't thrown her milk out, and that's not normal. Or mom has mail piling up, and the bills aren't being paid. So just, I want you to think overall that a person that has a dementia is trying the best they can. They are pulling themselves up from their bootstraps, and they are, really rising to the occasion. So in the beginning, a lot of times we'll say it's a care partner, not a care. You're a care partner. You're, walking alongside the person. And later on, as they have more needs, you may have to take on more roles. So now we're going to ask about the middle stage, increasing difficulty with finding the words. So when we say that the hippocampus is the keeper of the filing cabinets, and those filing cabinets, are where we keep our pockets of information and knowledge. And when the secretary isn't working as well, we have a more challenging time. So we might see,
get out of the sun, you goofball.
We may see people, instead of, referring to words differently. Instead of a watch, they may say that clock you're wearing, because the word clock comes up easier than watch, right? Losing their train of thought, so sort of drifting off. And eventually, if they, a lot of times they might begin to feel embarrassed about some of this stuff, and they may stop initiating as much conversation. And so they're starting to maybe withdraw a little bit. And that's because things are harder. And it's also just part of the disease that we might be able to treat, right? We might be able to help them with some feelings of depression and or anxiety. So, if you're seeing withdrawal or you're seeing excess worry, please talk to your doctors about that and your nurses, because we want to treat what we can treat in order to help the communication with each other and just the relationship in general. So we always say that behavior is communication, right? So when a person when they don't really know what's coming next in their day, they may ask you repeatedly, what's next, or what time is lunch? What time is lunch? And that can really be frustrating. And it's our job to just, check in with ourselves, be as calm and gracious and accommodating as we can be. So that the key is we want to connect. We want that person not to feel so isolated. And the better that our loved one feels, the better that we'll feel. So in general, we want to approach someone with Alzheimer's from the front, because we sometimes don't know how much of their peripheral vision might be impacted as the disease progresses. it's not necessarily that they can't see as well. They just may not be able to process what they're seeing. And then there's always a chance that if they're, if somebody we don't know may have had a stroke history, they may have some chunks of their vision that's just not working well, or macular degeneration. We want to sort of give them space. So, not to startle them, right? So, a little like even a touch on the leg, or, just kind of a slower connection into the relationship with our loved one, right? Eye contact is always important. So, getting on their level so that you're not peering down at them is also really important. We really don't want to be correcting them all the time. We have to adapt to their world. Our minds are working better than theirs are. And we have to really realize that arguing is not helpful. And instead, we want to be joining with, we want to be, we're the ones that have to change our expectations and the ways that we approach a person with dementia. So we do want to be careful of our tone of voice, and we do want to take our time. And so patience, right, is really, really important. So to connect further, we want to see, about their needs. Are they beginning to need reminders to go to the bathroom? Should we be, if they're getting anxious about something, maybe they just need to use the ladies' room, so maybe we need to be thinking about that a little bit more. If we also want to be brief in the way that we're communicating. I mentioned that sort of that conversation around their thinking gets kind of fuddled and muddled. So just be mindful of our word choice. And we want to understand that behind what's happening is a lot of emotion for our loved one. Fear, worry, depression, a feeling of, getting isolated and lonely. So the more we can do to connect and make them feel better, the better. Basic words, short sentences, speaking clearly, and to limit the distractions sometimes. Sometimes, the TV might switch from a regular program to the news, and most of the time the news is kind of negative, or the TV might be on with, by accident, some, police show that has, noises in the background or sirens in the background. And sometimes people can't always, differentiate what's real and what's not real. Or they just can get sidetracked by that, or just pick up on the emotion. Let's say the newscaster is saying something and it's alarming, so just be mindful of that. And here's where you might want to be filling in some words for them. But you might want to ask them too, do you want me to fill in words for you or not? Especially, and, just kind of get the sense of if that's okay with them. And if you can do it with grace. I had a person one time that I used to work with, and there was like a tiny little piece of paper on the floor, and she was very anxious about it. And she kind of was disrupting the flow of the class I was teaching because she kept kind of looking at that piece of paper. And instead of ignoring her, I said, let me get that for, do you want me to pick that up? And I'm like, oh, thank God. I said, you're such a nice neighbor. You were probably worried it was a pill, or something somebody needed. And she was all smiles because I didn't say, gosh, you were kind of a pain. You were interrupting me. Instead I said, oh, you wanted me to, you're, what a good neighbor you are. You didn't want anyone to, to step on that, right? Or trip, because to her, it might have seemed like a big problem, right? And it was just an easy thing to, let's say, meet her where she was and move on, and make her feel good in the end, right? As opposed to feeling like she's interrupting or something. So we want to be using a little bit more visual cues, and writing things down if they need to. And sometimes that helps too. They can have a schedule on a whiteboard, this is what, or a schedule in their pocket if they keep wondering what's coming up next. And, to the extent that we can turn what we might think is a negative into something positive, that would be really good. One lady that I knew I used to teach yoga, and most people do yoga in socks or bare feet. And I noticed that she didn't want to take her shoes off. And instead of kind of making a big deal out of it, I kind of said to myself, she may not want to tie her shoes again. That might be a skill she doesn't feel confident about. So I just left my shoes on and we did yoga in our shoes, and rather than really, make a big deal out of it, we just did it differently, so look for the ways that what can you let go of, right? What can you just do that works, and the good enough yoga class, right? Kind of lowering our expectations for how we always did things. Maybe meals have to be simpler. Maybe your lunchtime can shift if you have to, or your dinner hour might shift. And, so really just kind of adapting your world and your expectations to theirs. Empathy, right? Be as empathetic and reassuring as possible. And we don't worry about the facts so much sometimes. If if they want to say that the sky is blue, whatever, isn't blue or it's orange, yeah, it's really pretty. It's a really pretty orange today, and then move on. So, kind of validate and then redirect, bring the conversation somewhere else. So now we're going to talk just for a minute on the late stage. And, really when this is where a person, can respond, hopefully to some phrasing and have some conversation with you. But it's maybe very limited and it might just be episodic. Sometimes they're not in a very good place and you really can't get a lot of communication and connection with them. But then sometimes the wiring is better. So we wanted to help them feel safe and happy. And we're going to use these senses to communicate. So when you think about touch, right? Touch fabrics, hand massages, animals, if you're not allergic, and people like real animals, but people also feel very soothed by fake animals. There's these cute little cats that can sit in your lap and baby dolls. I know it might sound strange, but it could be very, very comforting for our loved one to be, to have a role, and taking care of something. So, and the power of that gentle massage, the touch on the shoulder, is really, really comforting and helping people feel secure. And then we also want to think about vision. So lighting should be up, right? And pretty pictures, animals, travel, have conversations about nature, get outside, get some fresh air. And, you can look at famous paintings. You'd be amazed what people can connect to and how people can feel good about themselves by all these visual things that can bring back information, can bring back conversation with them. But if I had to have one way of connecting, I would definitely recommend music. Really, the powerful way that music can illuminate parts of the brain and wake up language that may have been dormant. People tend to sing hymns that they knew when they were small. Most of my folks, they know the Pledge of Allegiance and they're very happy to say it. They know all the patriotic songs. They know all the Christmas songs, and they feel great about it. That's something that they wake up and they feel very connected to. So if they have favorite music, kind of get a sense of where they want to be with their music and play around with it. Sometimes it's music when they were 18 or 19, when they were feeling really young and independent, or music from the beginning of their marriage, or otherwise you can go way back to nursery school rhymes and things like that. It's nothing wrong with it, but music is a very, very powerful connector. I know lots of folks who love poetry and love listening to books. And it can be very simple books. Velveteen Rabbit, it can be, more elaborate. So children's books are incredibly soothing for many of us. So gentle tone of voice. Smells, it smells like apple pie, pumpkin pie, maybe hot dogs and hamburgers, right? I'm not sure what would smell good, but play with it. See what works. If you do want to dip cotton balls in essential oils, that's great, but just be careful the person doesn't pop it in their mouth, right? And also some of the essential oils, I learned from experience, if they get it in their eye, they're really spicy, they're not good. So, a little caution, right? But, definitely you can use your scented hand massage cream and things like that. And just, tea and coffee and, just kind of being very mindful about, oh, that smells so good. And they may not smell it quite the same way, right? Because sometimes their smell is impacted or impaired, but they can play along sometimes, right? Let them play along. And taste. I will tell you though, they say that everything, a lot of people say the last taste to go is sweetness. They love sweet. And my one friend who is a nutritionist said, I put 5 packs of sugar in my dad's hot and sour Chinese soup, which sounds absolutely crazy, right? And it worked like a charm and he had his soup. So, at some point you just have to go with it, right? And if I guess the thinking is add sugar. If they're refusing food, add a little sugar and they may go down. Popsicles, who doesn't like a little ice cream treat? Maybe a milkshake. So keep those things in mind. And just overall, we want to remind ourselves that we have to connect to their reality. We're the ones that have to change. They can't change. We want to respect them. We always want to treat them as an adult, even though, sometimes we know their functioning is being reduced. So we have a tendency to think there might be more childlike. But, keep the idea of adult games rather than necessarily kid games. But there's nothing wrong with a little bit of fun too. Watch your own mood, right? So that checking in with yourself, breathing, and that's why we're here today, because we have to manage our mood and keep ourselves going so that we can continue this caregiving marathon, right? And we need to let go of some of the guilt that we can do it all ourselves. And just to be, some of these really nice ways to connect with our loved one with dementia through the senses might be really good for us to do for ourselves, right? So think about that, while you're doing any of these activities, they're also just really nice for ourselves to calm ourselves and make ourselves feel really good about, even if it's just for a stolen 5 minutes or so. So I'll get back to this later, I think, the resources that we have, and but I'm going to let our other speakers talk. But I just do want to point out while we're on this slide, our helpline. And I'm going to put it in the chat too. It's 1-800-272-3900. And, we'll get back to some other things that we do, what later on. But I just think it's nice to just let you guys hear from someone else, and we'll go on from there.
Hello. Hi, can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, so this is when you get up and do some jumping jacks, take a stretch. But thank you for attending, everybody. Jody and I will try to answer any and all questions. And that brings us to our first point. It's kind of a gallery walk. If anybody wants to just tell us what they'd like to hear in reference to anticipatory grief and caregiving support, so we make sure we answer your questions and stay on track. Now's the time to do so. So just pop in there. No popping in? Okay. So Leslie, you can put our slides up. Feel free to pop in at any time. So we titled this Keeping the Love While Experiencing Anticipatory Grief, but as I was thinking about it driving to work today, maybe a more appropriate title would be Mourning the Loss of Your Hopes and Dreams, because when your loved one is diagnosed with a terminal illness or Alzheimer disease, it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of redefining your future. So that's kind of where we want to go. And again, at any time, if you have questions, feel free to pop in. But next slide. Our objectives are to define end of life and anticipatory and pre-death grief, identify 2 fundamental therapeutic tools for self-care and individuals and anticipating grief, and identify resources for anticipatory grief, and share a thought or two, and connect. So really, the vision here is that this is a communication sort of presentation. So we need your help. So please check in. Next slide. So when that diagnosis comes, it's a shock. You have many emotions. You may feel disconnected, isolated, scared, angry. So you may feel unequipped and know where to turn. Well, we just, the Alzheimer Association presentation is a good way to start. And you can reach out to either Talbot Hospice or the Alzheimer's Associations for questions and resources. And we may not be able to answer them, but we can work together as a team to try to get everything that you need, or at least start getting some of your questions answered. Next slide. So this is just a little emotional exercise, and I'd like you just to take a few seconds and look at this list and see if any one of these emotions pops out, because there's so many emotions that, may be going through one's head, your head, our heads, when we're trying to have empathy for you as caregivers who support caregivers. So if you just take a look, and then I'd like somebody, if you're willing, to share why you picked that emotion, please do.
I love this list, Lindy. And I was just listening to research about how important it is to isolate which exact, just something, there's some ownership if you can really pinpoint which emotion you're feeling. So that's great. That's great.
If you don't want to speak, put it in a chat. So I think it's really good. Social workers and chaplains, we like to identify and help you identify what emotion you're feeling, because sometimes you may not know what emotion you're feeling. So that's another thing. I don't know, but this gives you a list to kind of think about it. And one of the tools that I like to offer is journaling. So it may be just journaling a word, or journaling a word with an emoji. So somebody just put in the chat, I'm going to tense. Okay. Thank you. So this is a tool and that you can use. Okay, next slide. Oh, wondering what it looks like. Shock. What's life going to look like? You're going to get a new role. The schedule that you follow is like, oh, it's going to change, and it might be chaotic, and so many emotions and thoughts and fears. And yeah, So it just may be a little prickly at times, but just know that there are a lot of people in the community that are willing to listen to your shock. And that may be the best thing that we can offer is our empathetic ears. Any questions? Next slide. So is it normal to have all these thoughts and emotions? Of course, we're humans. You know what? And we're all different. And whereas one of our emotions may be very different than another emotion, they're emotions and you're allowed to have them. And you have to take into consideration your previous losses, the length of relationships you've had with the person that has this new diagnosis, your grief, self-awareness. Is there an understanding of what's really going on? Because that, on the other hand, the unknowns is going to give you a whole nother level of emotion, a whole nother level of anticipatory grief. What's my financial structure going to look like? Am I going to have to move? Am I going to be comfortable? How am I going to, if I can't take care of this person, how's that going to look? So there's so many things that questions and answers that are going through your heads. And we just want to say that they're all okay. And this is my claim to fame, is that our emotions are all okay. It's what we do with them that sometimes is not okay. Next. So what is grief? Grief is a noun. It's the suffering or distress over an affliction or loss or sharp sorrow or painful regret. Well, grief is so real before loss because, again, it's changing. The life, the hopes, and the dreams that you have are going to change. So in grief, it may happen within a year, it may happen within 2 years, it may happen within days, it may go on for years. It's gonna change. Any questions? Next slide. So this is just a small video on anticipatory grief. Just move it. May not. No sound. All right, I can review this. We go to the next slide. Okay, so anticipatory grief. It's different than the grief after the death. It's unique because of what we referenced in the slide before. There's so many unknowns, so many questions, so much work to be done. So grief before death may equal more anger, more loss of emotional control, and some social isolation, which we'd like to say, try not to stay isolated. Take your loved one out as long as you can. Take them out, even though they're going to repeat themselves or not be able to follow along with conversations or not be able to physically sustain whatever event you may be, doing, but go. So it's anticipatory grief is the world of unknowns, and meaning your world without what's your new title going to look like? What's caregiving going to look like? So it's a time to prepare, an opportunity to grow, and but it's not the substitute for death. It's just a time to ask the questions to your loved one. How do you want to be cared for? So start the question process early if you can, and find out all of those intimate questions that you need to clarify what your loved one's going to want when they're not able to communicate. Next slide. So some tips for coping with anticipatory grief. It's real. It's real. And you have to acknowledge that the process, the illness is gonna move on, and don't feel guilty about being upset or having the anticipatory grief, but make your time quality. You know, sometimes quality over quantity, you hear that, do quality over quantity. Make your time quality with those conversations, taking pictures, making memories, but remember to take care of yourself. You know, go for those walks, hire somebody or get a volunteer to come in so you can do your self-care. So it's okay to ask for help and ask for support. And it's okay that you might feel a relief at some point during the process. Next slide.
All right, so we've been talking a little bit about this whole, you know, anticipatory grief and how we deal with this. And one of the things that that when Lindy was talking, I just have quite a few people, just because of kind of where I am in life, that are going through this with their parents. And you know, it's really hard when you've worked with, you know, you've lived with your parents, you've spent time with them, and you've done all these things, most of us. And then you get to the point where they don't remember the same things that you remember. They don't interact with you the same way as they always did. And yet some people have a really difficult time letting go of the mother or the father that they always have known. And again, that's part of the grief response and how we react to that. So, you know, the way we think through this matters. And sometimes I think the whole part about getting support is important, and having people that you can talk with, and whether that be part of a caregiver support group like what we have here at Talbot Hospice and other places have as well. Those kinds of things can help us, you know, deal with some of those thought patterns that we may have. And then, you know, thinking about how when we don't deal with our emotions and when we don't work through some of these things, you know, if we're not caring for ourselves, this whole idea of how it presents itself physically can then kind of come into play too. So we need to pay attention to what that might look like for ourselves, even, you know, within ourselves and even our loved ones. And then how we respond emotionally is a big deal. And you know, when we were talking about arguing, I was just thinking about how when you're trying to correct the person, the Alzheimer's patient, your loved one, and they argue back with you, or then have a total meltdown, is it really worth it? It's not really worth it. It creates a tension and a disconnect in the house that really doesn't help anyone. And so how we deal with these in terms of emotional response are really important, because, and as I said, in terms of behaviors, these behaviors come out, and it's, you know, it's kind of like making your loved one eat. If they don't want to eat, we don't have to make them. I mean, you kind of have to think in terms of childlike behavior, and so not pushing things that we think are important. We need to be able to give them some dignity in the decisions that they're making for themselves, even if we don't feel good about them. So that's kind of a check-in, I think, for ourselves as well. And just in terms of, the spiritual piece, all of these things, when you're thinking about resiliency and reactions of how we, just in terms of grief, where we find our strength is really important. And for many people, it's going to be, you have people that will participate in a faith community, and then you have others who will participate in maybe a mindfulness training, or do something weekly where they're maybe in a centering prayer group, or something where they're actually caring for their spirit, so that they can continue to care for and have the resilience that they need to be able to care for this person long term. Because if we don't have that, it's a problem. It's not going to be fun for anybody. And it's a difficult road to walk. And, you know, some people have it for not very long, like a couple of years, and other people have it for 10. And so making sure that you're caring for yourselves and doing all of these things is important.
So Jody, I love bouncing off of Jody, but Jody has this wonderful idea about resiliency. You can either use it as a learning experience or get stuck in the road. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jody?
Well, it's, I actually was listening to something yesterday about how, you know, you could think about this in terms of grief, you could think about it in terms of emotions and all of that, but they were talking about it's like walking through a tunnel. If you don't walk through the tunnel of those emotions, of that grief, you're going to get stuck in the dark. And then you can't get your way, and you can't find the light and getting out on the other side. And so if we don't walk through our feelings, if we don't walk through our grief, we're not going to be as helpful to our loved one, and we're not going to be able to have the resilience we need to be able to stick with the caregiving and care partnership that we have with our people. So I think if people are getting stuck, I think it's important that you know, either find a counselor or, like I said, the support groups and other people who can help you, help you walk through the process for sure.
Thank you. Next slide. So I said, what are the goals? Well, I basically wrote down some goals that if I was walking in shoes of others, I just wanted to reflect on, but increase your awareness of the grief cycle. And that's what we're here for. And I see Eugenie Drayton's also on the line. She's a hospice chaplain, and we do all this. So if you call and need help or need resources or just somebody to listen to, Talbot Hospice has a lot of knowledgeable people here that can help you with your grief cycle. And I need to put that out there. And then, we have wonderful volunteers, and I see a volunteer on too that just knows where she can help find us and so forth. And so, but it's to enhance your self-esteem and your self-care skills and for yourself. And that's one of the things that I think is really important. And we do that through improving our communication. I made some notes after this PowerPoint was developed, but and it's more along the line of communication and your support tools. But I just say surround yourself with people that can understand your grief and your empathy and the experience that you're having. And you'll need all types of people. You'll need the people that you can tell the same story to over and over and over again. You'll need the people that can make you laugh and let you forget about the pain for an hour or two. And you'll need the people that are going to keep you going. And sometimes say things that may be tough to hear, but that need to be said. And so it's all in the process of normalizing the whole grief and validating that your situation is your situation and that life is changing. So that's really what anticipatory grief is all about, is the change that is coming. And our hospice social workers and chaplains, they do that as well. And when I say it's a team, together here, Mia and the development, and Laura, and we are, and everybody else, we're a wonderful team. So if it wasn't for that, doing the work that we do is challenging. So I'm going to try to relate that to doing the work you're going to do and that you're doing. It can be challenging at times. So create your team. Next slide. So this is just how may others help? Well, listen without judgment. And when you're picking your team, think about that. That you share your story over and over again, and so forth. And this is just a review, but this should be some of the characteristics of the people on your team. Are there any questions? Okay.
I was just thinking how sometimes, you have, when I think about this, listen without judgment, validating life changes and all those things. So often getting advice from people is not necessarily always what we need to hear. And so you need to have people who surround you that listen, that support your choices and encourage you also to do things for yourself that will remind you that you don't have to do this alone, that there are things that you can do for yourself that will make life easier for you. I mean, one of the things is simple really as, you know, getting some sunshine and going for a walk. I mean, all of those things matter. And so piecing together not only your group of people that you can depend on, but those even changes maybe in some things you have to do, life changes for you in terms of habits that might make things better for yourself. Again, to help you with this, the strength to get through and the resiliency you need to be able to do it.
Next slide. So sometimes the road is rocky and sometimes the road is newly paved. In grief, a person may feel chaotic and struggle to complicate tasks, to enjoy activities they once did. So you have to experience the process with grace and patience and just walk the journey and find people that are going to walk it with you. And because there's danger ahead, and we're not going to, we don't make any bones about that. Not sugarcoating it. There's danger ahead, and there are going to be curves in the road, and your backpack's going to get weighed down. And so we're here, and we welcome any calls. And Talbot Hospice serves people in the community that don't have people that are patients of ours. And so we would like to help you continue with life to the best of your ability. And again, you know, it's going to be a journey. It's going to be your journey, not ours, your journey, your story to tell. Next slide. So I think I put this on there as thought-provoking. I'm a quote person. And so to spare oneself from grief at all costs can be achieved only at the price of total detachment, which excludes the ability to experience happiness. And I read it out loud, and I'm going to use Jody's quote, or Jody's whole idea about this. And I love this. And she says, you know, you got to give grief a spot at your table and bring it to the table. So this quote says that to me, because if you don't give grief a spot at the table, then it's going to get pretty junky, and the dish is going to get pretty dirty, and it's going to cause problems with relationships and how you move forth in life and how you deal with grief afterward. So give it a spot at the table. Any questions? Okay, so the last slide. There are resources. Part of our objectives were to give you some resources. David Kessler, Brene Brown, they do a lot on grief. Alan Wolfelt, I like it. It's more for after the grief, but Center for Loss and Life Transition. You're going through a life transition. These are just a few. There's a whole lot more out there. There's a lot on meditation, which was a whole nother subject. So, you know, there's a lot on meditation in self-care. Any questions before Jody and I conclude our part? Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, ladies. That was wonderful information, and I want to commend everyone that's on this call today. I think you're very brave for being here today and empowering yourself with this information and kind of facing being a caregiver and the diagnosis of your loved one head on. It's a very brave thing to do, and we hope you're with us today feeling a little more empowered. Maybe you've got some goals and thinking about, just like Lindy was talking about, building your team. And we hope that the 3 different series have given you thoughts about community resources and community partners that you might want to reach out to as well, in addition to surrounding yourself with friends and loved ones that can help you through this process as well. So we'd like to open up this time for questions. How can we help you during your journey? And questions from this presentation. Can I ask how many of you have attended more than one of the Know Us Before You Need Us seminars? And have you found them beneficial?
Yes, I've attended all three, mostly for my dad. I mean, trying to copy these recordings and send them to other family members. So
Good.
it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That helps us a lot. And Maureen, we're so glad that you've joined us today. And that this
Thank
is,
you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
We
I
can.
unmuted. I finally figured out how to unmute myself. Going, I have a new phone. Sorry, guys. I am like the gentleman that just spoke before. I have a team of a brother and a sister. One is here in Easton with me, and one is in Asheville, North Carolina. My mom lives with me, but my sister is very much involved as well, because of course she's here. What I'm looking for is getting us all on the same page, my siblings and myself, and wondering if there's a way that we can do that through either Alzheimer's Association or Hospice to sort of put us all on the right track together as we move forward. Because my mom is, she's somewhere between the end of stage 1 going into stage 2.
Yes, I think absolutely there could be some help from either resource. And, you know, I think if you're local, maybe Lindy would want to speak to what can be done through the Talbot Hospice. But when you said stage 1 and stage 2, do you mean kind of middle stage? You know, what I was referring to as the 3 stages?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry. So
That's
beginning.
okay.
Beginning and middle. Yeah, she's I think she's on the end of the beginning going into the middle, and she is under the care of, you know, a doctor, obviously.
Good.
We have palliative care, and palliative care is like the program that we offer before a person needs total hospice care. And hospice care, just a review of the quick programs that we have. Hospice care is that if the doctor feels you have 6 months or less to live. Of course, you know, you could live longer than 6 months. We just go through a recertification process after that. And then palliative care is supportive care where you're still receiving treatment through the doctor, but there is a nurse practitioner that visits once a month. And Jenny Blackiston, who is the coordinator of the program, who is available to answer any and all questions that may come up. And Jenny's very knowledgeable with dementia related illnesses because that's been her prior careers, prior roles. And then once we get up and going again, we have a volunteer program. So it's, you know, you, Janie and Jody, if I've missed anything, or if you want me to clarify anything, bring it on. But you know, those are programs I highly recommend. Our palliative care program. My father my mom got my dad on palliative care program, and she is one of the biggest advocates for the program now because it was just a good experience. And it was before COVID hit. So she also had a volunteer who was cared for his own spouse with dementia related Alzheimer's diagnosis. And so some of the questions that she had, he could really help validate for her, and but just to let her know it was going to be okay. So I am a very strong advocate for the pre-hospice programs such as pathways and or palliative care.
Okay, great.
So I think Maureen's question was also, how can we help facilitate them getting on the same page? Like maybe perhaps like in hospice, we have family meetings where the family can all be together, whether virtually or, a hybrid type situation, and have those conversations and get questions met so that Jenny, somebody that's got some experience and of hearing the questions that people might have can help them differentiate what their thoughts are to what what might be helpful for them to understand.
Yeah.
Very good point. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was thinking too, in terms of, palliative care, and our team can bring that together, I think, and have a family meeting and help with that process.
That would be awesome.
think that
Thank
would be
you.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's a really, really wonderful thing. We also at the Alzheimer's Association have care consultations that can kind of walk you through, where are you now and what might you need to be thinking about down the road. And we can meet as a team, we can Zoom in and, get the extra parties involved as well. I love that idea of the seat at the table, for grief. But, I think it also helps, I've heard some families refer to kind of the Alzheimer's symptoms as like they kind of personify it and they call it Allie or Ollie, that it's not me, it's that, it's this crazy person that's, in my life. It's like they're kind of identifying it and, kind of, but inviting it in, where, it's sort of, we all know it's the elephant in the room. We know things aren't, it's making our life uncomfortable, this extra player, but in the way it's embracing. So I like that, it's getting to the reality of what we're as a family managing. But Maureen, I imagine that, the family member that's not close by doesn't get it all the time, and especially when we have strengths. I mean, our loved ones are incredibly bright. They've done amazing things in their life. And we all know they all show different parts of themselves, at different times.
Right.
So it can be really frustrating to say, we need to XYZ, spend a little money on caregiving or whatever. And the one's like, no, mom's fine or something, so we feel for you, but we don't, we know you're not alone in that.
Well, I'm truly blessed because my brother is an amazing human and totally, if anything, he's suffering from guilt because he's not here.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So maybe the care consultation or the conversation is, how do you help him find ways to connect with mom, and help him, manage his own, just relationship and build the relationship as well. So it sounds like it's a beautiful family that will just, what a reflection on your mom. She must be an amazing mom to have the three of you all on the same page.
She is. She really is. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this has been a really lovely conversation, and I want to thank Lindy and I think they did a beautiful job of some of the painful stuff. There's a lot of tenderness around, this the losses, and Americans don't like to talk about losses, and anybody doesn't like to talk about losses, even whether they have dementia or not. Aging is terrible. It is full of loss. And I think that, just being here and being available to listen and reflect, and know that we're all here for you. Our 800 number, as I mentioned, is, is the direct line to our helpline. It's 24 hours. What we didn't get to talk about too much is, sometimes we get in the way of ourselves, as when we get stuck in our stress. Oh, you're going to hear my landscaper or somebody, my neighbor's landscaper. I'm sorry. And, even just little moments of reprieve, maybe you have to lower your expectations for, how you would normally handle your stress. If you would normally go and play tennis for 2 hours and you can't manage 2 hours, then maybe you go take a walk for 10 minutes. So, just kind of squeezing it in maybe, and that might be important. Educating yourself. One doctor I know said if he could write a prescription for caregiver education, that would be one of the special sauces, because we have to change, our loved one can't change. And that takes time and practice. It's not, we could tell you I could tell you that my mom has mild cognitive impairment, and she can drive everybody a little batty at times. And here I'm supposed to be an expert, and it's so easy to just slip back into the old habits of, rolling your eyes or rushing her, right? And so it's not always easy to change our own ways of operating. And, I think that's one of the beautiful things about a support group, whether it's through Talbot Hospice or through us. We have memory cafes where you can bring your loved one and meet. A lot of times they come together at the beginning of a meeting will be everyone together, caregivers and their loved one with dementia. And then after the initial half an hour, they'll break off so that caregivers can talk privately and people with dementia can talk privately. Because, they each have their own unique things that they're carrying, and things that they're managing and dealing with. And, best intentions, sometimes a caregiver in the room, then our loved one with dementia won't tell the truth about how they're suffering, right? So I think there has to sometimes be some separation. And so our memory cafes are really helpful. And we also have everything that we're doing is virtual now, but we are moving back towards in-person programming. So keep in mind that that's coming. But in the meantime, take advantage of any of these Zooms that we're doing, all month long, and all summer long. We'll be doing lots of different programs. And even on our website, alz.org, you can just come in anytime and listen to a training that's pre-recorded. It's not nearly, it's not as dynamic, but it's quick. You get through a lot of information, and you can rewind, if you want to hear it again. And we have fabulous tip sheets on all kinds of topics, too many to talk about. And I did email a bunch of information to the group that had signed up formally this morning, and many of them couldn't make it today, but I will be happy to forward all this stuff. And, I just think it's just patience all around is really, really important. And, finding our own way of picking up our own spirits, and I always say you can catch a mood, and sometimes we have to fake it till you feel it, so if we put that cheesy smile on our face, before we know it, we're going to feel a little bit better. So we have to be intentional, I think, about our own what we're bringing when we're with somebody, when we're stressed out. We have to check in with ourselves. And I would also recommend Teepa Snow videos. She has a lot of wonderful training material and YouTube videos about all kinds of ways to connect with individuals with dementia and what's going on in the brain. And she's just engaging, so it's fun to watch, and don't be intimidated if it's a 45-minute video and you only watch the first 10 minutes, who cares? You got the first 10 minutes. So, you can just start where you are. And an open mind is really helpful.
Cindy, those are great resources. I just wanted to take a moment and welcome. We had a first timer, Ellen, joined us today, and I just wanted to touch base with her and to see if she had any questions for us, or if she wanted to share a little bit about her journey with us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just my mom is having cognitive issues, unable to express herself, getting a little bit of anxiety, dementia, where if she isn't expressing the right emotions when she's anxious, somebody takes her coffee cup away before she's done with it, and then there's an explosion over something really simple. So we've been noticing things like that. So it's, progressing, but she's still, managing day to day and still somewhat driving, but getting ready to stop doing that, I think, soon. But so we're just kind of like trying to get all the resources together, getting a little bit more experience and knowledge on the whole situation. And it's been helpful to know that it's not her, that it's this other person in the room. That you
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And Leslie, thank you for bringing Ellen into the conversation and letting her share a little bit of her journey. We wish we weren't on this journey, right? That's the sad thing, but we are. I also want to put a plug in for Shore Neurocognitive Health. If you live in Easton or in Easton, there are wonderful therapists and healthcare practitioners. Beth Parker O'Brien, Maggie Black, and Yvonne Liswell. I forget.
Liswell. Yeah,
Yeah,
Liswell. That's who my mom
yeah,
goes to.
good. And they're very well steeped. They just know this information. They know older adults. They're great at giving assessments. They're great at support. They do Medicare counseling. So they are just a fabulous. We're very, very lucky to have them in town. They're right behind the Giant. If you're from, and I think it's Pintail is where their office is.
Yep. Thank you.
I can't say enough about that practice as a local resource that we're blessed to have.
Shore Neurocognitive Health, right?
Yes, Shore Neurocognitive Health. And they take Medicare and other insurances as well. So, keep that in mind if you want some support and want to hash it out with someone. And your mom can go too. They have caregivers.
She might appreciate knowing that it's, she knows, of course, it's not just her, but my dad passed away last year. So, it's a lot of new things going on for her. And I'm sure it's frightening at times for her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the right idea, to think about how frightened she must feel. She must feel very concerned about what's going on. And that's just part of our process, of our role, is to understand that and be, as comfortable as, offering some support as possible.
Right.
And I think the tips that you get in a support group are really incredible. I had one gentleman tell me he interviews his wife every morning to see who he is. And some mornings he's her son, some mornings he's her husband, and sometimes it changes by the time they've had their cups of coffee. So and it just made it smoother. He just said, but he doesn't do it in a mean way. I'm sure he's subtle about it. He finds out where she's coming from. And then they are on the same page.
You gotta roll with it. Love lives on, right?
Yes.
With that said, Jody and I are going to end our time here because we both have sessions that we need to move on to, but we wanted to say thank you for coming and let love live on. So, Jody.
Well, I did put a chat about our caregiver support group. It is on Zoom. I'm sure we will, be putting time together that we can actually gather in person here pretty soon. But so the second Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. is our support group. So and Lindy usually runs for caregivers, and that's usually the one that she runs. But I was just, when you were talking about who am I, the interviewing, you hear about people saying, well, as long as I am considered a friend or someone positive in their life, then that's really what matters. Like, it really, you just have to roll with it, is exactly what Lindy said.
Yeah. And hunt the good stuff.
Yes.
I think sometimes later on too, sometimes people get caught in a little loop. They have a safe set of things that they like to talk about. And if you can find that loop that's a happy loop, and redirect them there, it's another nice tool to add in your tool shed, your toolbox.
Absolutely.
And I will say that spirituality and faith and, whether, really are so important for our loved ones. I think if they have a connection to God, and they can think about their life later, as being, restorative and whatnot, that's a wonderful, peaceful layer to add in. If they're more of a mindfulness person, that's great too. They can learn to be in the moment, and they can learn to, they can go with what they love, whatever they love, whatever gives them that sense of self, that sense of, of connection and support, right? We're looking for those, that depth to them that will give them more support and, and connect into their roots and make them feel less, more anchored.
Right. I'll never forget one of, I prayed the Lord's Prayer with someone, because if someone's a faithful person and they grew up in the church, oftentimes that will be a prayer that they will have memorized. And I learned from that patient that that was not the prayer she wanted. And I learned at that moment that Alzheimer's patients want you to look them in the eye, like we've talked about today. And I said a prayer looking her in the eye, specifically talking about how, she was, that God created her, you know what I'm saying? Like I was doing more of an encouragement kind of prayer with her. And I said, was that okay? And she was all excited. I thought, okay, now I get it, so, just the eye contact and rolling with it is, again, can't say it enough.
Yeah, really important, really, really important. And I love that, because they'll tell you sometimes if you hit the wrong, if that's not their favorite prayer, they may have, and maybe ask, try to pay attention to where they go. Maybe it's a poet, maybe it's a favorite book.
Exactly. Yeah.
Children's books are really full of wisdom and comfort for many of us. The Velveteen Rabbit, is, they get all loved up, right? Is beautiful, but many, many ways to connect. And I just think it's a pleasure, actually. That's the beautiful thing, is to find the joy in the connection. And, and when you do that, it's like time stands still. And, there's it's just enveloping, and just a creative way to connect with somebody else. And it's just a very enriching, you feel so good.
Yes.
So we hope that this journey is as painless as possible, but we know that there is pain associated with it. And you're not alone.
So
You've got Eugenie, and everybody's here for you.
Yeah.
before we jump off, I just want to ask Cindy, are there any upcoming education opportunities or events that this group should know about from the Alzheimer's Association? And then I'll ask the Talbot Hospice folks the same thing as well.
Well, we have a lot of education programs coming up, and Leslie, I'll just send out the actual flyer, because I don't have any in my mind off the top of my head that I can rattle off quickly. So I'll send the flyer to everyone.
All right, great. Talbot Hospice folks, do you have anything that you'd like to share? I think this support group is wonderful. Are there any other upcoming events or things that people might want to have on their radar?
Well, in the fall, we have, we have, our events aren't starting until the fall. We do have Paul Young, the author of The Shack, coming to speak October 28th,
Awesome.
which will be a pretty big event. Yeah. He's an amazing author. So that'll be, that's what we have on and we have some fun things like the Hospice Cup going on, which is a sailboat race, but we don't have anything else at the moment. We're just kind of starting to gear up.
Yeah.
All right.
And we have our walk to end Alzheimer's, Leslie, right?
Yes, we do. On Saturday, October 30th is our walk to end Alzheimer's, and that's a wonderful opportunity. That's how I started my journey with the Alzheimer's Association, was being a volunteer and joining the walk. It's a great way to connect with other people with the same journey as yourself. So I encourage everyone to consider that. It's a great way to honor your journey. And to feel like you're contributing towards raising awareness for this disease. So we appreciate your time today. Are there any other questions that we can help with, or resources you'd like to see, or maybe topics you'd like for us to address in the future? All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today, and we'll be sure to follow around with an email with great resources and a recording of today's seminar, and have a wonderful rest of your summer.
Great. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks. Bye,
Thanks,
Thanks, Cynthia.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Appreciate it.